My name is Bianca, and welcome to the PAL program. So, this program is intended for those of you that want to get a better understanding of the fundamentals of Prefect. There's a series of modules that are included in this program. There are a total of 6, and each module has an accompanying set of slides covering core concepts, and then examples are actually present in a GitHub repository, which will be linked along with the rest of the material for the course. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check the video description. If you are actually following along with this course and you're being guided by a Prefect engineer, then they'll make sure that you have a link to the GitHub examples as well so that you can run them in your own environment. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. There's a code of conduct that we encourage all of our users to abide by. Just so that you're aware of it, it's in our documentation, so it's linked there. Essentially, we expect all participants of this course to just be kind and respectful to each other. And if you see or experience an issue, feel free to reach out in the community Slack or to the engineer that is responsible for leading your course. And with that, let's cover some goals as well. General goals for this course: build competence with Prefect so that you can, in turn, build workflows that you can trust. Use this as an opportunity to connect with each other. So if you see somebody else that's following through with the course, feel free to engage with them, see how things are going, share ideas, engage with us. Just in general, have a good time. Now let's dive into an overview of the course. So here's the first half. First things first, we'll cover an intro to workflow orchestration and Prefect's role in the grand scheme of things, and that'll be followed up by the rest of the modules for the course. So in this video, we'll also cover Module 101, which has the Prefect basics. So you're going to learn how to write workflows you can schedule and monitor. After that, there will be additional videos for Module 102, Orchestration and Observation, 103, Working with Data and Creating Automatic Alerts, 104, Easily Switching Infrastructure and Managing Teams with Work Pool-Based Deployments, 105, Workflow Design Patterns, and last but not least, 106, which covers interactive workflows, running tasks concurrently, and creating advanced automation triggers. All right, let's dive into an intro to orchestration. So, what is orchestration? Orchestration overall is the process of automating, scheduling, and managing the flow of data across various pipelines and systems. Orchestration ensures that each step in a workflow runs in the correct order, under the right conditions, and at the right time. And it also ensures that there is a path to failure recovery when needed. Adopting an orchestration platform offers a ton of benefits across a variety of disciplines, from data engineering to data platform engineering, AI engineering, ML engineers, everyone in between. With that being said, let's talk a little bit about what Prefect is. So Prefect is an orchestration and observability platform that empowers developers to build resilient Python workflows that they can trust. It's also helpful to note that Prefect helps developers right-size compute depending on the type of jobs that they're running. So in a nutshell, Prefect is the marriage of automation, resilience, and scalability. Here are a few outcomes when it comes to having an orchestration platform. In general, developers save time by not having to troubleshoot as extensively, they save money by being able to right-size their compute, and they increase productivity by being able to ship faster and worry less about writing defensive boilerplate code. All right, we're ready to dive into Module 101, where we will learn a little bit more about the Prefect basics. Here's an overview of the agenda for this module. So first things first, we're going to cover some setup when it comes to Prefect. We're going to learn how to convert a Python script into a Prefect flow. We're going to create a deployment with .serve. Then we're going to run that deployment, schedule it, pass in some parameters, and also cover some helpful resources at the end. This step is fairly important. You're going to want to ensure that you have a nice Python environment set up with Prefect installed. To install the most recent version of Prefect, you can run pip install-u prefect, or alternatively, if you're using UV, which I highly recommend, you can do uv pip install-u prefect in your terminal. So you can run any of these commands that you'll see in the upcoming slides during the first lab, which will be the portion of this module where you do some hands-on exercises that require you to go into the GitHub repo and start running some code. Feel free to have a terminal open on the side if you want to try running these commands yourself as well. So once you have Prefect installed, running Prefect version will confirm the, version of Prefect that you're using. It'll also give you a bunch of other helpful information, namely the type of server that you're using for your Prefect install, which we'll see in a moment can be a locally hosted server or Prefect Cloud. All right, Prefect has two options for server interaction. You can host a Prefect server yourself by spinning it up locally. There's a command that you can run called prefect server start in the terminal, and that'll automatically spin up a new Prefect server for you to use. It's backed by a SQLite database, or alternatively, if you want to use a Postgres database, you can. Alternatively, you can use the Prefect Cloud platform. There is a free tier for you to get started using right away. If you want to check out some of the paid tiers, there's a host of organization management capabilities that you can explore. But beyond that, there's some additional features available in Cloud that aren't in Prefect open source, such as event webhooks, push work pools, and managed work pools. Oh, and the added bonus of not having to manage your own API and database is a plus in my book, at least. All right, let's dive into Cloud a little bit more. If you want to get started with using Prefect Cloud, go to app.prefect.cloud in your browser and sign up, or sign in if you already have an account. You can use a free personal account if you don't want to use an account that your work is using. So I'd encourage you to use a personal email, sign up for a free account, and use that as a sandbox. Once you have created your account, you can authenticate to it from the CLI in your terminal or in your environment where you have Prefect installed. You can run Prefect Cloud Login in the terminal, and you'll be prompted with two different methods for authentication. The first one is logging in with the web browser, and the alternative is pasting in an API key. I would say the easiest method would be logging in with the web browser because that creates and saves an API key on your behalf. If you would rather not go that route, you can select paste an API key and manually create that key from the Prefect Cloud dashboard in your account. In order to do this, you can go to the upper left-hand corner of your dashboard. There'll be a drop-down menu, and you can select the API keys option from the menu. You'll then be transported over to a new page for you to create an API key. All you need to do is hit that plus button, and you'll be prompted to create a new one. You can give it a nice descriptive name and an expiration date. I'd encourage you to use an expiration date, but if you never want the key to expire, that's an option too, and then you can just continue using that key indefinitely. Once you've created the key, you can paste it in the terminal where you have that terminal prompt open. Now, if you have multiple workspaces and you want to choose between them, this is the command that you would use to do so. In a nutshell, a Prefect Cloud workspace is a walled environment inside of your Prefect Cloud account. A lot of folks that have multiple workspaces either divvy them up between teams in their organization or they use them as mirrored environments. So one workspace would be for dev, one would be for staging, one would be for production. In the case of free tier, you will have just one workspace, so really all you have to do is select that one. Moving right along to our next topic, Prefect profiles. What are they? So profiles are persistent settings for interacting with Prefect. You will have one profile active at all times, and it's common to actually switch between profiles. So even though one profile will be active, you can have multiple of them. You can have one that's dedicated for interacting with your cloud instance. Maybe you have another profile that's automatically set up to interact with a self-hosted server that you spin up temporarily. You could have profiles dedicated to different workspaces in your Prefect Cloud account, or you can have profiles that have different settings saved to them, such as different logging levels. We'll cover some different environment settings with Prefect in more detail in the coming slides. If you want to see all of the different profiles that you've made thus far, you can run Prefect Profile ls in your CLI, and that'll show you all of the profiles that you've created to date. As far as where profiles are stored, those live in a profiles.toml file in your hidden.prefect folder. So that's where all of the information pertaining to different profiles are stored, such as the API key, URL, etc. A profile will stay active until you switch to another profile. And again, just to reiterate, they will contain your API URL, the API key for your Prefect Cloud account, and some additional optional configurations such as environment settings for your Prefect environment. Here are some quick little copy and paste commands that you can test out for yourself. These commands will help you create, inspect, and switch between profiles. Moving right along, let's talk about flows. To set the stage, I'm going to present a little project to you. Imagine we're a consulting firm for a company that uses weather forecast data in financial products. In the next couple examples, we'll be fetching and using weather data from the OpenMedio API, which you can find at that link. Let's start off with a basic Python function. This example is going to be in the 101 folder of the GitHub repository. For those of you that are familiar with Python, this should look relatively simple. So it's just a Python function. And what we're doing is we're fetching weather data from that OpenMedio API. We're passing in a latitude and longitude as input, and then we're retrieving the forecasted temp for that location and printing out the temperature in a print statement. And then of course at the bottom we have our if name equals main block where we are calling this function. What we're going to do now is we're going to transform it into a Prefect flow by using the flow decorator. So this is the most basic Prefect object to get started with using Prefect, and really it's fairly easy to implement. So all you have to do is add a flow decorator to that previous example that we were just taking a look at. And of course, you're going to import flow from the Prefect library as well. Next, once you've saved your adjusted Python script, running that code using python myfile.py will result in a new flow run, or in this case, a new instance of that Python script executing. We'll see in the standard output some very nice logs that show us that the workflow has started running. It also provides a helpful hyperlink so that we can actually inspect that flow run in the cloud dashboard, or the Prefect Cloud dashboard, and we can see the forecasted temp that we retrieved from the OpenMedio API as well. Now, if we were to go to that hyperlink, this is what we'll see. So it's a representation of that script running. This is a flow run page that's in the Prefect dashboard. We can see all of the standard output in this page, as well as the parameters, the latitude and longitude that we passed into the flow, along with some helpful metadata about the script in general. Flows essentially give you some automated logging capabilities. State tracking info is sent to the API. You can pass in input arguments that are automatically checked and coerced on your behalf. Prefect uses Pydantic under the hood, by the way. Timeouts can also be enforced through flow decorators, and there's a ton of other benefits that you'll see in the next couple slides as well. All right, deployments. So, what are deployments? Deployments are a Prefect concept that we visit whenever we want to turn our Python workflows into an interactive application. Deployments allow you to switch infrastructure easily so you can run the same script in multiple environments, and you and your teammates can run your workflows manually, on a schedule, or in response to an automation trigger once you've created a deployment for them. Deployments are a server-side representation of a flow. It contains metadata for remote orchestration. So the deployment isn't the script itself, but rather a list of instructions and conditions that are communicated to Prefect so that Prefect knows, okay, where can this code be retrieved from at runtime? What kind of schedule does it need to run on? Under what conditions does it need to run on, etc. How do we go about creating deployments? So the first method that we're going to cover is to create a deployment by calling the flow functions.serve method. And here is an example of what that will look like. So you can see we've taken our fetch weather function that we've called in our if name equals main block, and we have added a .serve method to it, and we are giving the deployment a name. If we run this script with this adjustment, what will happen is a new deployment is created, and that will start a process locally or wherever you happen to run that script, and this process will poll for scheduled runs. And here is a screenshot of what you should see in the terminal. Congratulations, with a small change, you've just made a deployment in Prefect. Once that deployment is created, you can actually go inspect it in the UI. That'll be in your deployments page, and you should see the record there. Now it's time to run it. One way we can go about doing this is by doing a quick run in the Prefect dashboard. So from that new deployment page, we can go ahead and click the Run button in the upper right-hand corner. That'll give us an option to do a quick run. And if we select that option, what will happen is that polling process that we started on our machine will pick up the request and then kick off a new run of that fetch weather script. Once that script starts running, we'll actually be able to see all of the information pertaining to that new flow run in the UI as a new flow run record. And of course, all the standard output is going to be communicated back to Prefect Cloud. So all of those logs will be captured. And we can also see some helpful metadata about who created this run. So once you kick off that run, you should be able to see that you're listed as the creator under the properties portion of this new flow run page. Alternatively, if you would rather run the deployment from the CLI, you can run prefect deployment run and then enter the name of your deployment, and that will kick off a new run as well. If you want to shut down your serve process that you kicked off, all you need to do is Control-C, and that'll shut it down. Moving right along to scheduling. So now we've pretty much familiarized ourselves with a few different ways of how to run a flow manually. Let's talk more about scheduling. When can we schedule a deployment? We can do so upon its creation, or we can pass in a schedule to a deployment after it gets created through the UI or through the CLI. In the UI, if you go back to the deployment page, there's an option to add a schedule, and you can click that button and it'll take you to a little form where you can go ahead and schedule your workflow. Here's an example of what that form looks like. So you can choose the schedule type up above, and then you can pass in the schedule information down below. And then once you save that, the schedule will be applied. Or you can add a schedule when creating your deployment. So if we make a few adjustments to our .serve method in the original example, we're going to pass in a cron schedule along with it as well. There's a few different schedule types that Prefect supports, and they're listed here. So there's interval, there's cron, there's rule. So at the end of the day, just pick and choose what is most familiar to you or whatever suits your needs for scheduling. Now, for our rule, there is a little bit of a cheat sheet that you can follow, and we've linked that here. Alternatively, you can install Marvin, which is another Prefect package, and you can use that to generate a rule schedule for you by just writing it in plain English, and then you should get the rule schedule back. Now, you can do more than just create schedules. You can pause and resume them as well. You can pause and resume them directly from the UI if you want. There's a little toggle next to each schedule that you can switch on and off at your leisure. And what that will do is it will pause or resume the upcoming work that is relevant to that deployment schedule. Here's something that's worth noting. Shutting down your serve process will pause a deployment's schedules. So there has to be a polling process somewhere that is polling for that particular deployment. If you shut it down, then there's nothing there to kick off new work. All right, parameters. If your flow function has parameters and no defaults, you have to give it values. There's a few different options for specifying parameters. For the first one, you can make default arguments in the flow function definition. Alternatively, you can override them at the deployment creation, or you can override both of them at runtime if you want. So parameters in general, they're dynamic. They can be passed in at runtime. Here's what it looks like to specify parameters at deployment creation time. You can do so directly in .serve, like we did previously with the schedule. As you can see here, we're setting the latitude and longitude values that are expected by our fetch weather function. Or you can pass in parameters in the UI at runtime, and that means that anybody who wants to kick off a flow run that's part of your team from the UI, they'll be able to do so just by entering in those values from the deployments page once they select the quick run or custom run option. And of course, if you can run deployments from the CLI, you can also pass in parameters to the command as well. And here are some examples of how to do just that. All right, we have come to the end of the module, and we're going to cover some helpful resources for you. Use the docs. If you want to figure out what the latest and greatest patterns are with Prefect, the docs will be your surefire way of going about that. You can also take a look at the Prefect codebase. So Prefect is open source. It's all out there for you to explore. Dig into the code, create an issue, make a PR, and don't forget to give it a star. Let's do a quick little recap of what we covered so far. So we've covered Prefect versioning and installation, logging in, profiles. We've talked about how to convert Python scripts into Prefect flows, how to create a deployment with flow.serve, how to run that deployment, pause and resume the schedule for that deployment, and then we also covered a few more resources at the very end. To recap a few key terms as well, a flow is a workflow, a flow run is an instance of that workflow executing, and a deployment is a flow plus orchestration capabilities. So deployments allow you to schedule work, they allow you to run work remotely, and allow other team members to run scripts with different parameters as well. Now we're at the hands-on portion of the module where we can actually get some hands-on keyboard time and review the topics that we have covered. And here are our goals for the lab. So you're going to use the OpenMeteo API to fetch your first weather forecast. You're going to start by authenticating your CLI to a Prefect Cloud account of your choosing. You're welcome to use a personal account or a test workspace. You're going to take a function that fetches data and convert it into a flow. There's an example of that in the 101 folder in the GitHub repo. You're going to use serve to deploy that flow. You'll run the flow from the UI once your deployment is created. And then you can pick and choose how you want to create a schedule for that deployment. Remember, you can do it through the CLI, the UI, or the Python SDK. And to wrap everything up, you can shut down your serve process and restart it. Here are a few stretch goals for you as well that you can explore on your own time. Challenge yourself to run a deployment from the CLI and then override the parameters. See if you can write your own weather fetching script and maybe adjust for looking at wind speed instead of looking at temperature, for example. Now, if you're on the personal plan and you end up bumping against the deployment limit cap, you are all good to delete unnecessary deployments to free those slots up. Okay, everyone, I am going to take this opportunity to help you get started with the setup for the lab. So I have a Python environment on my right-hand side of my screen here. So this is my cursor environment. This is my IDE of choice. And then on the left-hand side, I have some setup instructions for UV, which will be my environment manager that I am using. What we're going to do is create a new environment. You don't necessarily have to use UV, although I highly recommend that you do. And I am going to set it up right now in my terminal. And then grab this little command. Okay, and now that that is activated, I'm going to go ahead and install Prefect. Lightning fast. And now that I have Prefect installed, I'm going to make sure that I am authenticated to my Prefect Cloud environment. So for all of you that are logging in for the first time, you can do so directly through the terminal. I would say Prefect Cloud log in, and then selecting the browser login option would be your best choice. There is an alternative that you can use. Would you like to re-authenticate? Yes, why not? So in this case, you can see that I have opted to re-authenticate even though I already had an active profile previously. You may not get prompted with the same thing. But now I have the choice to log in with a web browser or paste in an API key. And in this case, I'm going to log in with my web browser, and you'll see on the left side, I have a new pop-up that is prompting me to authorize this login. And now I've successfully logged in. I can close this window. And it's asking if I would like to use my sandbox workspace, and I am going to go ahead and say that I would like to use that. I'm not going to switch, and there is that. And if I go to my sandbox account, okay, now that I have my sandbox dashboard open and I've authenticated to my cloud account, I'm going to go ahead and run a flow. In this case, I'm going to start with the bare Python function. You can find these examples or examples that are similar in the GitHub repo that is linked in the description of the video if you're watching from YouTube, or from the GitHub repo that was provided to you with the content of this course by the Prefect engineer that is helping you work through it. Regardless, let's get started with decorating this Python function. I'm going to go ahead and import Prefect. I'm going to start off with just a flow. We're not into tasks yet, although we will be soon. I'll add my flow decorator. And then, as you can see here, I have my if name equals main block, it's calling the function, and really this is the extent of what you need to get started with writing Prefect workflows. So I'll run this. Oh, first of all, let me make sure that I am in the right folder on my machine. So that looks right. I've kicked off the Python script, and we should see that the script executes. It prints out the result of the forecasted temperature. And if I look over on the left-hand side, I should see a new flow run record. Now this is the flow run that was produced whenever I ran this script. And all of this standard output you can see is communicated back to Prefect Cloud on the left-hand side. Next, let's serve this flow and give it a schedule. So there is an example of how to do that here. In this case, I'm pretty much taking the exact same flow function, but in the if name equals main block, you can see that there is a .serve method that is appended to the fetch weather function call. In this case, I am passing in a name for the deployment that this method will create, and I am passing in a schedule as well. If I were to run this, what we should see is that instead of the script just running on its own, we will see that there is a new polling process started, and this polling process is responsible for kicking off new runs of this script on the schedule that was provided using the serve method. And here we can see the deployment record in the dashboard. So this is on the server side of the house, the Prefect server side of the house. And that schedule that we passed in is here. So it's running every minute of every day. That's what this cron schedule represents. Now I can disable this, and if I wanted to add a schedule in the UI, I absolutely could. So instead I could say maybe an interval schedule of 60 minutes. And if I saved that, then that would become the new active schedule. I can check out the upcoming runs, give that a little refresh. And you'll start to see the runs begin to populate into the future. They're running every hour on the hour. And if I wanted to parameterize this flow so that I can pass in some different inputs from the UI, I would just run this script. So I'll spin down this serve process just so that we can see what it looks like. And I'll start this new serve process and create a new deployment. This will be called deploy params in the UI. And what's convenient about this is once that deployment is created, you get this URL back, which you could just copy and paste, and it'll take you right to the deployment record page. So as you can see here, there's no upcoming runs scheduled. Let's say I wanted to pass in a schedule, I could do that here, and I would just need to save it. Refresh the page. There we go. There's the new upcoming runs. But now if I wanted to, let's say, pass in a different set of parameters for the latitude and longitude, I could do a custom run and I could change these values here. So let's say instead of doing 11 and 12, which that's the flow run that I actually just kicked off a second ago using the quick run, I'm gonna pass in, let's say 16 and 20 instead. I'll submit that. And we should see that a new process is kicked off with the new parameters that I passed in. You can see I'm the creator of this particular flow run, and there's the 16 and 20 that I passed in to the flow run. So feel free to explore the rest of the examples on your own pace. and let us know if you have any questions. And with that, congratulations on making it to the end of Module 101.